Hi, everyone. Ariana Friedlander here with Rosabella Consulting, and welcome to the Co-Creators in Conversation interview series, where we celebrate leaders who are challenging the status quo and creating economic value by genuinely caring about their people. Right now, I am really excited to be speaking with Marie Roker-Jones, co-founder of Esteem. We had a moment to chat before this interview, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Welcome, Marie.
Hi, well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear your story and share it with our listeners. And I wonder, to start, if you could just share a little bit about yourself. What you do at Esteem and
Sure.
what Esteem is?
Sure. So I'm the co-founder of Esteem, and what we do is we bridge social environmental impact to innovation. And we help companies to just connect employees to causes that they're passionate about and to build solutions for nonprofit organizations that are addressing those causes and issues.
That is so cool. And I wonder, what was the inspiration for creating this organization that is that bridge builder between technology companies and nonprofits?
I think for me, it's always been about social impact and how do you give back and social good. And really looking at people feel just more connected to their company's mission. They feel just more connected to the company they work for if they're giving back in a way that's meaningful to them. So I think this way, it really gives employees the ownership of being the ones that think about how do I want to give back and how can I create impact on a personal level. So I think that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, it is. It really does make a difference. I mean, we know so much now about the benefits of feeling that sense of purpose and action, feeling like what the work you're doing has a meaning and an impact. And I wonder, was that always part of your career, or was this something that has developed more recently with the Esteem?
I would say indirectly, it's always been part of my career. I always looked for how can, not necessarily the bridging of like employees to impact, but really how can you create purpose, as you mentioned, in the work that you do? And it could be the smallest things. And so I found ways to do it for myself, or if I'm working, with coworkers, just talking about what is it that they care about and finding ways to either volunteer or create a program within a company, because there's so many ways you can look at it. And I think that's the best part, is that there are really no limits. And it's once you step out of thinking about yourself and think about others, you kind of just come up with so many things. And it's so different from when you're just staying there, like, what am I going to do next for my career? And what am I thinking?
Right.
What do I care about? And it's just, I don't know, it's just so fulfilling. So.
Yeah, I mean, I really relate to that. And I'm sure our listeners do as well, especially that, shifting out of that, what should I do for my career thought process and into that, how can I be of service?
Exactly.
Thought process that can really change things in dramatic and powerful ways.
Exactly. I think, we just recently celebrated like Martin Luther King's birthday and the Day of Service, but I think shouldn't every day we think about how can I be of service? And it doesn't have to, I think when people think about it, they think it has to be something so grand and big. And it could be just something really small as, how do I help a coworker who's maybe struggling with something? How do I reach out to someone I haven't reached out to in a while, just to make sure they're well? How do I check in on my elderly neighbor? There's so many ways we can do this. So
I so agree. And my one of my coaches asked, in reflecting about the new year, what new act of service I was going to start doing. And it was a question I really had to sit with for a while, because I think for me, it's easy to get into the shoulds there and to, like you said, it doesn't have to be this big thing, but that's, where my mind initially goes. And what I realized was the new way I want to be of service, and in a new way this year, is to provide food for friends and family members in need, just cooking some good old chicken soup. when folks are sick.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. I mean, isn't that what connects us? Food, right? Like we have so many conversations over food. And I mean, when we're around food and when we're eating, it's something that we can celebrate together. So I think that's awesome that you're doing that for people.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I've had a number of opportunities already to serve in that way. And it's not a monumental thing, but I know it's making a positive difference. And I think that's kind of similar to what you were saying. When we can identify those small acts, it can really make a big difference. And it's cool you build a company around that notion.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, but it also keeps us, I think, humble. It also helps us to remember what is our mission and not get so caught up in, the hustling culture that is so much part of the startup ecosystem. So being able to take a step back and say, is this about us or is it about the work we do, and is it about the people we serve? So
yeah. I think that's such a good point. And I think that hustle culture doesn't just happen in startups, but it also can be pervasive even in like the nonprofit world, and in areas that do have a strong sense of service. We can sometimes lose ourselves in that need to provide service and to burn out,
exactly.
Thinking we have to give it all, and then we give too much and we can't sustain our giving. I wonder, like, if you have any experiences like that yourself, or you've seen that at Esteem, and how you navigated that.
I think I've seen it for myself. I've had what's called compassion fatigue, where I feel like I, am giving and giving. And one of the things it's so important to do is to make sure that you are just giving back to yourself too, and practicing self-care, because it can be easy to, I guess, cross the bridge from being of service to being a martyr, right? Because it's like, oh, I do so much. So it's finding that balance and really thinking about, okay, you know what? I need to take a step back and to take care of myself, because otherwise I can't take care of others. And I would say the last time that really happened, I was working for a nonprofit and working with military families. And I was so determined that, and we had just launched here in New York, and I was so determined to have a Christmas party with gifts for military families that I was exhausted. And then I wondered, how much of the night did I even remember? Because I was so caught up in making sure that, everything was well, everyone was happy, everything was good. And I was done. It was so tired. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about your journey? And, you've experienced that in the compassion fatigue, the burnout, and you've mentioned the importance of self-care. What have you learned for yourself along the way? What does that balance look like? And how do you strike that? How do you maintain your sense of well-being, and what gets in the way?
That's a great question. I would say it's a challenge every day, because I'm conditioned. First of all, I'm a mom. So I'm conditioned to believe that, hey, you know what, I have to take care of others and I have to make sure everyone else is okay. But one of the things that, being diagnosed with like a chronic illness kind of was my wake-up call. It was this call to say, you are not immortal. You are not indestructible, that your body is telling you something. And I remember this quote about, if you don't listen to your body when it whispers, then you'll hear it when it screams. And so I think at that point, my body was just screaming that you are doing too much. You're not taking care of yourself. And what's the good of taking care of others if you're not going to be around to enjoy your time with them? So this journey it's been a journey of reflection, understanding, compassion, and grace for myself. But also, I have to say, grief, right? I had to grieve the person I was before and come to the understanding of who I am now, and how do I set boundaries? How do I live this new life?
Right.
Because it's so different. And if you don't take the time to, to think it through, again, your body's going to scream.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, I know that from personal experience as well, that, my body, will either let me know gently or will let me know forcefully when I'm pushing myself too hard. And there's that tension too. I think, like you said, that grieving who you were, and that sense, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like kind of internalizing and telling myself this story of I'm letting other people down, or I'm weak, or I'm not the leader that others expect me to be if I need to draw this boundary right now, and to limit the time I'm spending in these other avenues, because I really need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself.
Exactly. And I think it's also about, helping others to understand that you are taking care of yourself, and they can either be part of that and be a support system, or you really have to take a step back. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, when I was diagnosed, I was working for that same nonprofit. Mm. And one of the things I learned is that we have to pay attention to how companies and our coworkers and people we leadership treats us. And remember that, this is what's more important. Mm-hmm. It's not so important to give your all to any cause or company, because you have to take care of yourself first. And you're just beating yourself to like this point where it's hard to get back. Like mm-hmm. It really literally is. Like I was so busy, so much trying to make sure that everyone else and everything else was okay, that I seriously was last on my list.
I wonder if you can take us to that moment. I mean, it's so generous of you to share about your experiences, that the wake up call for you was being diagnosed with this chronic illness. And I think that these kinds of struggles and challenges are not something we typically talk about, especially among leaders and entrepreneurs, that part of the journey is, you're going to struggle with how to create a business model that succeeds and getting buy-in and all of this stuff. But there's this other element of the personal struggle around health and well-being. And so I think that it's so generous and kind of you to share with us a little bit of, what that time was like, what that wake-up call was like for you, and how you navigated it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for talking about that. And I think the hardest part is what you mentioned about, like, when you feel like, oh, I'm in the leadership role, that I have to. I mean, I think it's just these expectations we have of ourselves, and that we assume others have of us. Right. So we make these assumptions, and I made this assumption that, I have to keep pushing myself. I have to keep working. I cannot show anyone that I can't do this, because I have to just prove to everyone that I'm good and I can do this. But the truth of it was, I wasn't in a good space mentally or physically, because the truth of it is when your body's telling you something, your mind, your mental health, it's impacted by that. And we don't talk about that enough in spaces and professional spaces, because I mean, we're seeing it more now. Mm-hmm. But the truth of it is that people worry. So this is why when you see somebody's a CEO and maybe they've been diagnosed with cancer, they don't say anything. So many people don't say anything because they worry about how others are going to perceive them and how others are going to treat them. So a lot of times people stay quiet. And I think I did for a while. I was so quiet for years.
Wow. So you received this diagnosis, and were you trying to sustain what you were doing before, or, tell me, like, kind of what the transition looked like? I think that listeners will find that inspiring to hear.
So it's interesting, because when I was diagnosed, I was working for, the nonprofit, and I was like, I have to, my region needs me, regional director, and nobody needed me. I needed me. And so The first thing what's interesting is my doctor was like, you are just either stoic or just not just processing this. And I was like, when she said that, I think that was for me a wake up call, because for your doctor to say that you're not responding or reacting to something, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, again, this, I had this armor of like, I have to be strong. I just, what am I going to show you? I'm not going to show weakness. I'm not going to show that this is something that's going to bring me down. But it's also cultural, right? Because I think a lot of Black women feel the need to continue pushing through, and we push through as opposed to pausing, right? And I didn't pause. I just kept pushing through until, my mental health kind of cracked. And I just remember, it was funny. I mean, I could laugh now, but it wasn't funny then. Sure, I just remember we had tickets for Michelle Obama's tour, and literally right before we were going, I just started crying because I just felt overwhelmed by the amount of work I had to do. I felt unsupported by, the nonprofit I was working for. And then I just felt like, what's next for me? Like, how am I going to deal with this diagnosis? And so here I am getting ready to go see Michelle Obama at Barclays in Brooklyn, and I'm having a meltdown. And what do you say to people, right? Like, how can you say to someone, oh, I'm having this meltdown because everything's coming to me at once now, and this is not the right time. So, but also you learn that there's never grief and anything and trauma, no matter how big or small, all unpredictable about when things will bubble up. And so I think bubbling up at that point in public, mind you, was another wake-up call for me, because I didn't want to deal with my fragility as far as my emotional and mental health. And I had to, the truth of it is, it's going to come out, right? So you have a choice of dealing with it, or it's just you're just gonna have a meltdown right before you see Michelle.
Which, I mean, there's no better person to probably have a meltdown before seeing, because I'm sure if you actually could talk to her, she would have just embraced you. And
and she was interviewed by Sarah Jessica Parker, and it was just like, it was such a nice moment, but to get there,
Yeah, and maybe that was just the recipe, right? That the right ingredients were there where you could feel safe to melt down almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of what she embodies as a leader herself.
Yeah, and I think it was really just me keeping it in so much and trying to, like I said, push through. And I remember that day, I started the day at about 6 or 7 a.m. And by the time, it was 12 hours later when we were going to see her.
Right, yeah.
So by that time, I had been doing so much. And I think my body and just my mind were just like, oh my gosh, stop.
Yeah. We've reached, the critical point, that breaking point. Yeah. I wonder, your story is so moving to hear. And, I can definitely identify myself within those experiences, and I'm sure listeners can as well. And I wonder, take us through what it was like to take the armor off, and what do you put on in place of the armor?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. This is interesting because I'm thinking about also like my zodiac sign, right? I so embody being a crab and Cancer, in the sense that I will withdraw and go into my shell. So like, it's so funny to me that and I don't physically do it, I don't have a shell, but like mentally and spiritually in my space, I kind of withdraw and go in. And so I don't think I ever fully give up the armor. I just think that I hide in my shell, and then I might poke my head out and be like, okay, I could deal with this today. And then when something comes up or I feel just overwhelmed, I just go back into that shell. So it's the same thing as having, I mean, it is an armor if you think about it, right? But I think the difference is that I used it as a way for me to, one, not really have to talk to anybody about it. And two, to kind of, when my doctor said I was stoic, I think I was really pretending that this is not happening. Like, it's so funny how you can do that. It's happening. The rational part of you knows, but I think the emotional part of me was like, okay, we'll figure this out some other time. And so when I had that, that meltdown, there was nowhere to hide, right? Like I literally physically couldn't hide anywhere because we were in an open space. Yeah. But also I couldn't hide what I was feeling because it was just so much. So the process, I don't know, like everyone has a different process. For me, I just go back into that shell. But I do think about the times when that shell can just be broken, right? Like it can, but I'm very protective. I'm very protective of my heart, and I'm very protective of my space and my family, but mostly my heart. Like I worry about, like, if I share this, is somebody going to use this against me? Right. So yeah. I don't know if I even answered your question. So I went on my own journey, but
well, I mean, we all are, right? We're all going on our own journey, and I think it makes sense, and that awareness, that self-awareness for you of recognizing, I go into the shell, and it definitely sounds like, that was how you responded with your doctor too, and I wonder, like, maybe has the shell potentially grown? Like, do you maybe let other people into the shell with you?
No,
now
it's a shell for one.
Okay.
But what I've learned to do is kind of like break down some of the layers of the shell. Okay. Which means that, even having a conversation like this, I don't think a couple of years ago I would have been able to do it. Okay. Just even saying it out loud. So I think there's some layers that are maybe melting away. And it's also because I think there's a beauty to being transparent and being vulnerable. It makes you human. It makes you relatable. It makes people feel like they're not alone. And so, I had to look at that too, that, here I am talking about social impact and social good, but if I'm hiding in this shell and not really just sharing a little bit, I don't know what niche, by sharing, I don't know who I could help, who I could support. So I'm learning to do that in a better way, but it's not easy because I have used that protective shell for so many years for so much. So.
And it feels so vulnerable when we open ourselves up in that way and share the rawness of what we are struggling with. And I know for myself, when I have stepped into that place, this fear of rejection, that compounds it. And it can take that one person to judge you and make a critical remark to like land in such a hurtful, painful way, even though there's a ton of other people that might be, thanking you for the courage.
Exactly. No, you're right. But also just being able to say out loud, I don't feel well today. Yeah. That takes a lot. And for me, that's a lot. It's hard. And there's some people that can just say it. But for me, it means I'm giving up. So I'm still struggling. It's not, I don't think everyone's different. And it's okay. we're all on our healing journey. And so
sure.
from me, it's learning to balance the emotional and mental part of what I'm dealing with physically.
Yeah.
And being honest, saying, I don't feel well.
Right. And that self-honesty, it starts with self-honesty first, right? And then we can share it with others. But it's hard to even express that if we aren't even being honest with ourselves.
Exactly.
First and foremost.
And why should we be so strong? Like, who wins? Who am I influencing? Who am I inspiring by being so strong? Nobody.
Right. I almost want to use quotation marks around so strong, because it seems like this misnomer of strength too.
It is. And no one, here's the thing. I'm so busy worrying about what somebody's going to say if I say, oh, I'm not feeling well, I can't do something, that I just make myself more sick because I just did something. And maybe I didn't even do it in the best way possible because I wasn't just being honest. So you've asked me about the journey. The journey for me has been, at what point do I let people know? One, and two, at what point do I just say enough? I need to take a break.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell me, what does self-care look like for you now? And is there a best way that you found for people to support you beyond friends, family members, colleagues?
Yeah. Well, first I have to say I have an amazing group of women friends. They're just so amazing, so different in so many ways, but all embody light and love, which is so helpful, right? Because I just have these women that I can just be myself with and just say I'm not well, or I hate this, or whatever. And they allow me the space to do that, which is great.
So powerful.
And and I have an amazing family that helps me to allow myself to be vulnerable too. It's not always easy because I think one of the things I had to, and it's a process, we were talking about journeys and process. Yeah. So it's a process. And one of the things I can say is that it also helped how I communicate with my mom. My mom's somebody who always talks about being strong and push through. And I remember saying to her, I don't need you to be my motivational speaker. I need you to be my mom, and I need you to understand this is hard for me. And I get that you want me to be strong in this moment, but I can't be, and I need you to accept that. And that was a big thing for me because it's not, I don't always have that opportunity to be honest with her about that because it's always been about being strong and being strong. And I was just like, at this, I can't do it today. I just can't, or I can't do it. I have to just melt down or whatever. Right. I just can't do it. And it's okay. And I had to get her to understand it's okay if I do that because I'm not you. And if you were to handle it differently, that's fine. But this is how I'm handling it.
Wow. That's so courageous of you to speak your truth in that way. And and expectation and need.
Yeah. And you asked about the self-care journey, and that's part of it. The part of the self-care journey was to say what I need, what do I need? If I need in this moment to lie down and, I used to think, oh God, if you take a nap, it's just, you're being lazy. And no, my body's just saying, you can't, just lie down. It's okay.
Right.
And everything will still be there when you wake up.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know for myself, when I listen to my body's needs it that way and I do lay down and take a nap, I end up being more productive with the time I have left than when I tried to push through. And it's such a struggle. It's so hard. And the quality of my work suffers, and the amount of time it takes to get through my work is elongated.
No, you're absolutely right. It's so true. Because I remember taking, recently I took a nap and I was like, wow, I feel so refreshed, and my son was like, this was a nap. It's like, I don't, no, it just felt like so great. I felt great. I could do things. And I was like, why am I denying myself this? For what? Right? Just so I can, and I get so stuck on being this, I guess, be an example for my sons of like what whoever they choose in life as a partner. But then I said, is that really fair? Because if I'm pushing through, then they're going to have expectations, of a wife or a partner, whoever, to push through. And that's not fair. You have to show them that it's okay to take a break. It's okay when you don't feel well, so that they can have that empathy for somebody else. Because otherwise they just think, my mom, she was able to push through. Why can't you? It's not fair.
Yeah. And I think to your point too, it's about, listening to your needs. And if you can train yourself to listen to your needs when it is a whisper, the suffering that you can reduce or eliminate, rather than only hearing the needs when they are screaming.
Exactly. So true, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. It's been so amazing to hear you share about this journey. Again, I think it's so relatable for so many of us. I do think that all of us at some point, whether we've dealt with a chronic illness or not, will experience that time where our bodies just say no more and they scream it at us. And so I think it's so valuable to hear and share your story. And I honor and respect that even that is a very courageous act because of that shell that has been part of you for so long. So thank you for sharing that. And and I'm wondering, like, how has this impacted you as a leader at Esteem? Like, how has this changed the way you show up as a leader?
That's a great question. And thank you for providing a trusted space for me to share. I would say it's a struggle because I'm constantly having to say to myself, do you push again? That whole push, it's something I have to remind myself, why are you pushing through? So I remember one time, my co-founder, I said he wanted to, I forgot, we were supposed to have a meeting or something. I said, I can't. I just can't. I need a break. And what I said was, I really need to just take a moment and, and tomorrow, let's see how it goes. But right now I need to. And then I just kind of was feeling like, oh man, why did I say that? Then I should have just done it. And, you're going back and forth, and we ruminate as women so much, right? It's like, oh, should I shouldn't have said that. I should have. So for me, showing up as a leader is like, how do I, again, the shell start to, but also how do I connect with people in an authentic way if I'm not being honest with myself? If I'm not feeling well, it's going to show on my face. It's going to show how I respond and react. And it doesn't, and then I think about how are people responding to how I'm behaving. And so I get caught up in all that. And then it reflects in me not showing up as a leader. But honestly, being a leader means more than what how we define it in certain societies. Like, being a leader means that you are setting an example for others on how you manage yourself, and how you engage and interact with others, but mostly how you show up. And as I said, authentically. And there are times I didn't. There were times I just showed up because I know I had to. But if you ask me what what the conversation was in a meeting, probably couldn't remember because I shouldn't have been there. So it is still a struggle for me to show up as a leader and not and to be honest when I'm not 100%. So,
Right.
Yeah.
I feel that too, that it can be so hard to always, and sometimes I know for myself, it's like, oh, well, if I'm going to be honest, that might lead to this extensive conversation that I don't want to have right now. I just want to be able to be honest and like say goodbye.
Exactly. Or I want to do this presentation, and here's the other thing. It's putting on a mask. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's really like, oh, let me put on this mask and be the leader that others are expecting me to be.
Yeah.
But inside, under that mask, it's just a mess, right? So why put up the mask? Because I'm not ready to be, I'm not ready, or I fear judgment of like, oh, can she really do this, or should she take a break? I don't know.
Yeah. It's a really delicate line to walk in that, and especially, in terms of Brene Brown's work, she talks about disclosure versus vulnerability. And as a leader, are we disclosing things in a kind of manipulative way, or are we modeling authenticity? And I feel like it's one of those things where you stumble and fall trying.
Oh gosh,
and yes. We all do, and we all have those moments where we go, whoops, kind of kept the mask on that time, and whoops, I took off the mask, but I also made a really horrid face at the same time, and that wasn't helpful. And it's such a tightrope.
And you don't want people to lose confidence in you, right? I think that's the other thing, is because it's like what people imagine or what people think about leadership. So you're like, oh my gosh, I can't show weakness. Right. I can't show a crack in anything. It's gotta be perfect, and it's gotta be bold, and you have to be confident. And especially as women, I think as women, we really put a lot more pressure on ourselves.
Right.
That is necessary. And because of the narrative, right? This narrative we have that if I show up this way, then people are not going to respect me, and people are not going to find me valuable. So I have to show up the way that people want me to, maybe not necessarily the way I want to.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I feel like we could talk on this forever, because it's so fun to chat with you, and it is so relatable. And I realize that we've gone a little over our time, and I want to hear what it looks like to co-create at Esteem. How do you do that there?
It means to listen. It means to not be so much in a rush to give your advice or feedback, but to really listen and to ask for permission too. I think to co-create means asking for permission, which is not something we think about when we think about leadership or creation, but it's asking, do you feel comfortable with me, doing this, or are you okay with this process we're doing? So co-creating means taking a moment to ask the questions, to listen, and to pause, right? Pause and let the other person let their light shine. I think that's what it is. It's really about giving opportunity to each other to let your light shine. But in the process of doing that means listening, pausing, and paying attention.
That's so beautiful, and such a great way to really encapsulate some of the pieces of co-creating that I think people forget about, and that the permission piece is huge. I think that a lot of people enter into conversations assuming that there's this permission to co-create, and things can really fall apart quickly when that happens. So I think that that's such a beautiful share and insight. So thank you.
Thanks. I think I had to get to that place though.
Right? We all do. We all have to learn, the hard way. And occasionally we get lucky and don't have to learn the hard way. But I think it's not fair to expect that anyone doesn't make mistakes. We all do.
Mm-hmm. And we're all learning.
Yeah, all learning. The gift and curse of our shared humanity.
I love that.
Thank you again, Marie, so much for joining us for Co-Creators in Conversation. It's been so great to have you here today.
No, it's been great to be here. Thank you for, like I said, creating this space to be able to be honest and transparent.
Well, I'm grateful for you sharing your story. And I wonder if listeners want to get in touch with you or Esteem, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I mean, our website is esteem.com. I would say LinkedIn, just look for my name, Marie Roker-Jones, on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to connect with others and get to know new people.
Fantastic. Yeah. And we will include the links in the show notes as well. And I want to thank our listeners for joining today for this latest episode of Co-Creators in Conversation. And if there's one thing that inspired you from this conversation that you want to do something about for yourself, maybe it's around self-care and listening to the whispers or responding to the screams in your body, just maybe identify that one thing and share it with a friend, because we're more likely to take action when we share our intentions with others. So that's my encouragement to listeners. And if you want to hear other Co-Creators in Conversation interviews, you can check them out at rosabellaconsulting.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everyone, and be well.